just pay attention to the ones who need a little more love, and you will have more of an influence on their lives than you ever imagined, because they'll be paying attention to what love looks like, even if they haven't seen it in their own home. They'll see it in yours, and it makes a mark.
You're listening to the Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. Well, hello, friend. I am so pleased you are listening once again to the Motherhood Experience podcast. Have a wonderful episode for you today. My guest was so much fun. Before I get into who she is, what she's about, I would just like to ask you to subscribe and or leave a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps us tremendously, and we love it when the podcast is introduced to new ears. So thank you in advance for engaging with us on social media, on the reviews, all of the places. And also head over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. If you are not on the email list already, that is how you can sign up, and you will get a weekly email from me. There you can learn about each episode, each guest, and a more in-depth conversation, either about the episode, a guest, and or about yours truly, the host, which I know some of you are just dying for some info on old Val, right? Not really, but I just had fun saying that anyway. My guest today, Colleen Souza, was so much fun. She was introduced to me through a podcast matching program. I went and researched her as much as I could and thought she would probably make a really good guest. We had the most fun conversation, and we talked about all kinds of things, but most importantly, the fundamental beliefs that shape who we are, how we mother, and how they affect every other area of our lives. I'm so excited for you to tune into this conversation today with Colleen Souza. Be sure to check the show notes for all of her links, website information. You know the drill. And without further ado, pull up a chair. It's time for another Motherhood Experience conversation. Thank you so much for coming back to another episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast, where I am joined today by Colleen Souza. Colleen, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, we start every episode with ages of kids and stage of motherhood you're in. So why don't you share that with the audience?
Ages of kids. My children are adults now. So I have a 32-year-old. My son, Timothy, is 32. I have a daughter, Juliana, who's 29. And then because God is so fun and blessed us, we have a 20-year-old who is in her junior year down at Arizona State University. So I have 2 adults that are off in their life and one more that's almost out the door all the way.
She's in the launch process.
She has semi-launched. Yeah. Dependent upon mom and dad for a lot of things, but very independent out in the world already. Yeah.
Well, when you were a young adult about her age, what were your views or plans on becoming a mother yourself?
You know what? Becoming a mom myself, I always knew I wanted to be one. I actually always wanted 5 children. I wanted a big family around me. I wanted lots, but life happens as it does, and God has his plans. But I had my son and my daughter, and my husband and I were kind of plugging through life, and for a long time scraping along the whole survival thing that we all do. And we like, we got to go on a vacation by ourselves. And we thought, our life is wonderful. And our kids, it was the first time we'd ever traveled without our children. And we came back expecting our third, but it was funny because in that vacation, we made the decision that, you know what, we're good. We've been blessed. We have a boy, we have a girl. Maybe this is where we're supposed to be in life. And then along came Miss Grace. So,
oh, I love that story. And
so I've 3.
So it was a surprise, we'll say, but were you thinking, like, if the third surprise happened, were you thinking maybe you would get to that 5 number?
Yeah, I wanted a 4th right away. I wanted to have
Really?
another one because I knew my older 2 were so close to one another, and I knew there was a
Sure.
9 and 12 years difference between the what we call the big kids and Gracie. But the doctor was the one that wouldn't allow me to because I had a lot of complications. And so my husband just looked at me and said, as much as it would be a kick, I can't do this alone. So because we had 2 teenagers and an infant. He was like, no more. So unfortunately, that wasn't in our cards, but I would have loved to have continued on and just had that second little family.
Yeah. Did you have complications in all 3 of your pregnancies or just the last?
All 3. I did. Didn't stop me, but I did.
Yeah. Girl, same.
I want another one. We're going to make this work. And each one was similar, unique, but similar. Yeah. So my body was done. So it was good.
Yeah. And so were you working? I mean, you had kind of settled in then with the 2 older children. Were you working at the time that you got pregnant as well?
I was. I was a classroom teacher for about 20 years. And so at the time I was teaching when I was just starting my teaching career when I had the other two, because I had worked in counseling and some stuff beforehand. And then I was in the heart of my teaching career when I had Grace. So, yeah.
What age level were you teaching?
Oh, I taught a little bit of everything actually. So I did my credential work I was teaching fifth, sixth grade. So in my school district here, that's still elementary school.
Yeah.
And then I took a position at the intermediate school, which was seventh and eighth grade in our school district. And I taught that for another 15 years. And at the end, I was also teaching some high school courses. But in the middle of it, because of the way I did my credential work, I had never sealed the deal with this final little 6 weeks I had to spend in a primary classroom to write all of that off. So they put me in kindergarten in a summer year-round school, and that was not my gig whatsoever. After having taught older children, I'd come home and go, I'm going to make them all cry. I'm way too sarcastic, and they're kind of snivelly, and they kind of cling to you. Having spent my time with the youngest being fifth grade and then all up into high school, yeah, it was a fun summer.
That's so funny to me. I'm not sure what age group I would rather teach, but when I started going to college, I went for a secondary ed major. That was what I started. And then at our church, I was teaching the 6th and 7th graders every Wednesday night for a solid year from June to June, and I changed my major. I
I'm
couldn't
sure.
hack it.
And I know that it's a large portion of that of just who you are. I love the feistiness. I loved just the challenge they gave me. And then I loved helping them learn how to rein that in and harness that for the good instead of the evil. But when I did step back from the classroom finally about 15 years ago, I mean, and I don't mean this in any kind of a flippant manner, but I sort of felt like I had served my tour of duty after having spent 20 years as a middle school teacher. Now that doesn't mean that I don't get that there's a whole lot more to those who serve, but I think there's a piece of servanthood that happens right there when you teach middle school for that long. Yeah. And I ran things like I ran a peer counseling program for the kids in need on our campus. And I did all the schools detention at my last school, just because I loved having them come in and then trying to get in there and figure out where their soft spot was. So they would come in with all this attitude. And some of them, I think, got into detention a lot just because they liked to hang out with me on Mondays and Wednesdays.
No
And so,
joke.
I'm not kidding. I knew them better than their teachers knew them, and I knew their life stories. And so, this is part of it. I think I was a safe place, so they came to me.
Do you think?
I'd be like, what did you do this week? And sometimes they just say, can I come in and just do my homework in here? Like, yeah, but I had to put on my mean face while I'm running detention. So that's okay, Miss Souza, I'll just sit in the back. Okay, all right, fine, yeah.
Do you think part of that was from your counseling background?
Probably so.
Yeah.
Probably just my life approach is just getting to know people and developing relationships. And, I mean, even the most rotten child or adult has a story, and you just have to pull it out of them. And if you can get to that place with them, which is not always easy, then it's all good.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that your teaching methods and your mothering methods overlapped, or were they more different? They overlapped?
They overlapped. And that was a process of discovery. The book that I wrote talks a lot about that. And that is that we were asked, I was sharing with you a little bit beforehand when we were getting to know each other. When my older kids, fellow teachers, people around me would say, your kids they have no trouble looking adults in the eye and having a conversation with them and doing that kind of thing. What is it that you do? And I'm like, I started to pay attention. I'm like, I don't know. It's just what I do, along with my fabulous husband, Brian, I've been married to for 35 plus years. But we started to pay a little more attention to what we were doing. And I realized that I expected my kids to talk to people, look them in the eye, to do all those things. And I realized I did the same in my classroom. I expected the same thing when a kid walked through the doors of my classroom. And then later, when I left the classroom and joined my husband in our real estate business, I realized as I work with, it wasn't 2 or 3. I came along to be the administrative assistant and just sort of help my husband in the background so I could write this book I'd always wanted to write. And that was 15 years ago. And within weeks of just hanging out with him and just being available and seeing exactly how it rolled, what he did, he'd come back from appointments and go, nobody ever hugs me. Nobody ever hands their kid to me. Nobody ever, whatever we were doing in the home sales process. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, whatever you do, keep doing that. And then it made me fall in love with the fact that it's the same thing just with adults. get to know them, help them, educate them in making that big financial decision and all of that, but just create that relationship with them. And then before I knew it, and probably now, to be honest with you, some of my very best friends have been clients over the last 15 years. I'd go
Oh,
to
wow.
have a coffee with invite them over to have a glass of wine, have them for dinner. It's just sort of this, it's become that those relationships you build. So definitely
And I
overlapping.
think that says a lot too, because buying and selling a home is no small deal. Like, and it's not always seamless. It can be very stressful so for you to form like friendships,
Lifelong friendships. Yes.
that's really saying something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Is
been
that
fun
the
as I put this book out there. I realized it because I've been, of course, sending texts because these people are all in my phone or on my email. I'm like, hey, by the way, hey, I got this book out that I told you about this 5 years ago. I really actually did it, and I have people just picking up the phone and calling me that I sold homes to years ago that are like, Colleen, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. When are we going to get together? It's been too long. So it's definitely a rapport that I built with
Were
folks.
you always a people person even as a child yourself?
Yes, yes. I always ask my mother mothers, hopefully you can laugh and have a sense of humor about it, but I've always been the little spunky one. But my family's very quiet and very reserved, and I love my mother to no end. Love her. She's a wonderful, wonderful mom. If you listen to this, mom. But the bottom line is, she's not social. She'll tell you, I'm not a joiner. She never really wanted to get involved in things, and I used to say, Are you sure, mom? The security wasn't as safe at the hospitals back then. Are you sure that you came home with a smile? When I grew up looking like them, it was evident that had to stop asking that question. But I used to say, Are you sure I'm yours? I mean, you love me, but are you sure I'm yours? And she used to eye roll at me all the time. Like, would you stop asking that question? I'm like, well, because I was always very social and I had a very quiet family. Yeah.
So what do you think it was about how they parented you that helped develop that personality? Because it sounds like from the way that you were raised and the things you were taught was much different than how you were implementing those things in your classroom and in your household. So what do you think it was there?
I think that it's just my husband would tell you it's how God wired me. The bottom line. I mean, because he's another example, and our children can speak to this on both sides. Neither one of us are anything like our families, and so we were destined to come together and create what we call the world of Souza. But I always was just so curious. And I think I was just wired with this energy to connect with people. And in that wiring or whatever you call it, I just wanted to talk to everybody. I didn't always know how. Actually learned a lot more of that from my husband when I was 18 and I met him, where he'd say, I used to not be able to look at the cashier going through the grocery store in the eye. I'd say hi, but I wouldn't look at him. My husband's like, make eye contact. It works out a whole lot better. And so I would try that. And so then I think part of what I taught my kids were the things that I discovered in young adulthood that I was
Mm,
like, okay, this is how I came to life. And so I wanted to make sure they had those skills. Maybe that's part of it.
yeah. Did you being so social, do you think you ever wore your kids out with your social calendar?
The three kids, and they're all very different human beings. They've all been, created in their unique and individual and wonderful way. Never wore out my son. He is the most social human being on the planet. He has the ability to social network that goes far beyond his father and I. He's phenomenal in that. His success comes in his ability to connect with others. My that's my 32-year-old. My 29-year-old is quite a successful designer. She's a dress designer for Old Navy Gap up in San Francisco. But she would like to fly under the radar if at all possible. One of
Mm,
the things that she loves about being a designer is she puts stuff together and other people show off her work. She doesn't have to do it. That works really well for her. She's that kind of a person. She couldn't promote a book like this because it would just annoy the crud out of her to have to be in front of people all the time. But when she decides that she's about something, she has every ability to communicate. It's not an ability to communicate, but I would push her just a little bit. My youngest, Gracie, is an incredible blend of all four of her parents, I like to say, because she was raised by teenagers. I literally sent her to kindergarten with a note pinned on her because I knew her teacher. And it just said, please understand that all of the words, actions, and attitudes that come out of this child are not 100% the responsibility of her parent. She was raised by teenagers. And that note, my friend took a picture of it and sent it to me. She's like, you're killing me. But the bottom line was that she picked up on the habits and model of all four of us. So she's incredibly, ridiculously social when she chooses to be. Yeah, can't stop her. So no,
oh
I don't
wow.
wear her out. Abject humiliation was a part of their life because I worked in their schools. So I would be the
Yeah.
teacher was up in front. And there was this one time I decided the teachers were doing this lip sync thing. And I grabbed the mic and I said, "This is for you, son." And he's sitting in the high school crowd and he just stood up because he had no other choice. He played into it. He goes, "I love you, Mom," in front of 1,000 kids. Like, what else are you going to do? But yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking about my kids in those situations too. And sometimes I don't even know, Colleen, when it's going to happen or what it will be that happens.
But it
There's
happened.
just something like a switch that flips inside of me, and I get an idea and act on it before I even realize what the idea is. And
I laugh
my,
because that is me. I just
yeah,
process it. Mm-hmm.
even this summer, this is the one story that comes to mind. This summer, I took my daughter to Bible camp, and we're going through the registration line. And every single kid, the camp director is asking, "Are you excited to be here? Are you excited for camp? Are you excited?" And they're all like, "Yeah, yeah." Every single one. And we get up there, and before he can even ask us, and I don't even realize what's happening, I just start going, "Whoa, we're excited." And his wife is looking at me and looking at my daughter, and my daughter's just standing there like, "Yeah, this is
Yeah, that's my
my
mom.
mom."
No,
Also, I'm excited.
well, yeah. By the way, as much as I can be at this age, I have a story in the book where I'm like talking about this fundraiser thing we always had to do on our campus, and I'd get the kids way into it, and this is 7th and 8th graders that are like, "Oh my god, everything is so moronic, and it's so a waste of my time," and whatever. When
Yeah,
my son was so in our school district, there's the 8th grade. We don't do 8th grade graduation anymore. Most places don't, but in the tradition of it, it's like the heading off to high school. So they
right.
take them to a big water park at the end of their 8th grade year so that they can, have a day of celebrating that they finished all the younger stuff and they're headed off to high school. And there are a handful of the schools around here that do it. So there's like a week where anybody that's at the water park during that week, during the day, is other teenagers just like them. And we had this meeting place that all of our kids from our school, hundreds of them, were supposed to meet up, and we served them hamburgers for lunch and the whole 9 yards. And I had the megaphone in my hand. I help myself. So we were trying to get kids, please sit down, whatever. And I just grabbed it from our administrator and I said, "I need to borrow this for a minute." And I walk around, I'm like, Timmy, honey, where are you? And all the kids are laughing because, my poor kid, they knew who I was. And he's like, he raises his hand right there. And I'm like, "Are you having a fun day, honey? Did you put on your sunscreen?" And I look at his friends. "Did he put on his sunscreen? Because we don't need a sunburn, Timmy." And my son to this day goes, "Mom, that was one of the more fun experiences I had with you growing up." And I don't know what came over me, but I just had this need to play for fun. And I would have I taught it's called academic block, and it was like the homeroom, English and history. So the kids had me 2 hours every day, and I had 2 of those blocks. And at my last school where my daughter was, we tracked with those kids for 2 years. So they had me for 7th and 8th grade, all 2 hours every day. I was their mother. But I would just tell stories as they tied in with my teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And every day at lunch, my daughter would walk in my classroom and go, "Really? Really? You had to tell that one today? That was important for you?" I'm like, it got the point across,
Yeah.
God, Mom. So yeah.
So,
Humiliation.
do you, with this kind of like, what would you call it? Spontaneous, maybe bent?
Audio processing
Yeah.
out loud before I really think about what comes out of my mouth. That's my gift.
Do you have like, were there any regular or routine things you would do with your family, like a game night or a special dinner or something like
Yeah,
that?
we had a lot of routines, I think, that were set in there. And I share a lot of those different stories. I mean, we had a couple of annual routines, like birthdays were, that was your day. That was your day in fact, my 2 daughters ended up being born just a couple days apart, 9 years apart. So it's Princess Week. And so,
Oh,
it was for the longest time when they were younger. We had multiple birthday celebrations. But the bottom line was your birthday was your day and you got to choose your meal. You got to choose how everything went that day. And, it was all about you on that day. So we made sure birthdays were special. We had traditions well, there were holiday traditions. We've done for years this gingerbread building thing that we do on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. We had a whole bunch of little traditions like that. First day of school, one of the biggest ones, and my husband would go, "I cannot believe you didn't mention this," because I was a teacher and their whole life changed come the end of August, beginning of September every year because they had mama home for all those months. The big kids did well growing up. And I left the classroom when Grace finished first grade. So she had a different mom, but all those years, their life completely changed on that day because I had to get back to seriousness too. So we made the first day a celebration and we took our kids out early at like 6:30 in the morning, and we had ice cream sundaes at Denny's for breakfast on the first day of school. And we would celebrate. We'd pump our kids full of sugar, and we'd make them like order an egg on the side. But we would fill them with that, and we have pictures from when they were little all the way through when my or youngest graduated a few years ago from high school and headed on. By that point, we had so many kids that had come over the years. We have one of my daughter's best friends who's going to have her own baby in the next month. She would come home or come down from the Bay Area because we're in Central California just to be at our first day of school breakfasts, because her whole life she would be a part of them. And so by the time we had the last one, we had a picture of like 20 kids, and every kid that could joined in and tried to get to the last Denny's ice cream. So that was a fun tradition. And then we'd send them off on their way as they headed off into the world. And our daughter even FaceTime. She's now does it at college. Her best friend and her go to Denny's on the first day of classes in the fall. And we have a
I
picture
love that.
all of us FaceTiming in from around where we all live. And we had a big group FaceTime call while she ordered her ice cream sundae at Denny's for breakfast
Oh
on
my
her first day of
goodness.
the semester. So yeah,
How fun.
that's a fun tradition. But we tried really hard, as spontaneous we were, to have some regular things. We did what we called
That's
the
so fun.
summit every year, a goal planning summit. We did that every year between Christmas and New Year's. And to this day, if one of them can't be here, we FaceTime them in, and we still do our planning summit. So we set our goals and ambitions for the year and things. So we had a lot of those sorts of little things. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I don't know the relationship status of your children or anything, but do you think one day if grandchildren are a part of
Oh, they'll do it. They'll
your
do this.
future, yeah, that will continue with,
That will continue. And I truly know that they will do that in their own, families. Yeah.
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 That,
We had one New Year's where we did a summit about 3 or 4 years ago. This is at the end of COVID. We had rented a house, and we were over on the Central Coast. And some of my daughter's friends were so excited to be there because one of them was like, I've always heard about the summit. It's my turn to be a part of it. So, it's just such a silly thing. And there were years, believe me, where our kids were like, oh my God, we're planning goals. And they would begrudgingly write on the papers that we had together. But as they grew through that middle school, early high school phase and started off into life, it's just a habit that they have. And now they appreciate stopping, getting perspective. So definitely.
oh, and I love how it encompasses both having fun, having a good time, but also being so meaningful and establishing this legacy.
It really is. I really hope legacy. Thank you for that word. I think that that's what I hope that we've established with a lot of this is that, and then that's really the book that ended up bringing us together. It's called Living by the Mantras, and it's common sense wisdom for an extraordinary life. And what we called mantras in our house could be equivalent to quotes, axioms, proverbs, you name it. But we just happen to say, stick with the mantras all the time. It just became something I said. So I had to name the book Living by the Mantras. But it's just really simple, common sense things like choices, self-control, respect, positivity, hard work, focus, no regrets, how we treat others. And it's more about those common core principles that are really a bedrock in life, that are principles we need to have more of in our world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's telling the story through my family and through my business and my classroom of why those things are valuable and important and how they embed themselves in our world. Yeah.
So, Colleen, did your motherhood journey shape some of those mantras, or did the mantras kind of shape your motherhood journey?
I think there's a yes and a yes.
Okay.
Because I think there's things like I like to share. And which one is it I'm looking at because on my list? I'd like to pretend I have all 21 of them in their order. I have written this book. I have edited this book 25 times, but I'm like, is that number 10 or is that number 11?
Yeah.
Mantra number 10, I'm smart, I'm beautiful, and I'm going to have a great day. And the principle I tied to it was manifesting, but really it's just that declaration on a daily. And so when you say what drove what, I saw a couple of videos of this dad that made his daughter look in the mirror before she started each day and say something positive about herself so that she felt positive about herself going out into the world. And so I didn't see that or watch that dad and follow his little videos on social media until number 3 came along. So did the mantras shape my parenthood? Yes, it did, because number 3 was my grand experiment of all time, right? Okay, hey, I did this. And like I tell my older kids when they say, you do not raise her the way you raised us. I say, well, by the grace of God alone, you live past the age of 10. So we're going to go with that and understand that there isn't a perfect rule book for raising children and that we do our very best every day. I'm getting better and I'm learning what to get stressed out about. And with Gracie, The day she stepped out of the car for kindergarten and I dropped her off, she had to look at me and tell me I'm smart, I'm beautiful, and I'm going to have a great day. And she did that every day. If it was me or her dad, she had to say that every day as she got out and left for school. And even when she was in high school and was getting in the car and driving herself to where she went to school, she would say that to me. And she called me the other day and she was tired and exhausted. And so we don't get it every day anymore. But she would just, okay, I'll call you after I get off of work today and blah, 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 blah. And I go, tell me I'm smart and beautiful and I'm going to have a great shift at work, Mom. I said, okay, why don't you just call out for some great tips tonight too? Because she waits table. She goes, I'm going to make great tips. I'm like, okay, go into your day, go finish it. So that is something that the mantras taught me is that,
Mm.
that was one that I added to our menu of choices of things that we wanted to make sure we were doing as a parent. And I saw it work when we were in the middle of COVID and kids were sort of trapped in their homes with their parents for a long period of time. I noticed she was getting less and less motivated, though she was surrounded by us and wasn't out in the world dealing with whatever. And it hit me that because she didn't get up and leave us every day, I didn't ask her to think positively about herself every day for a long time because I just saw my kid and there was a lot of dynamics with teenagers and
Right.
COVID.
Right.
But I was like, how can I help this child who is struggling again? And so we went, had some coffee, sat down and talked about it. And together we realized she hadn't thought positively about herself and started her day with that energy of, I'm going to have a great day. So she started doing it again. And it was like a switch. It was like a switch. It took like a week and she was just a little more positive and realized, so that was something that learning these ideas taught me as a mom, but a lot of them I think were just incorporated in who we were. My husband, there's one that when the job's too tough for some people, it's just about right for me, and that was one
Mm.
that we brought to parenting because his grandpa was a laborer, owned a ranch, and my husband spent almost every weekend on that ranch growing up, helping mend fences and take care of the cattle and fix cars and do whatever grandpas and grandsons do. And his grandpa used to say that when he'd go, Grandpa, we can't do this. Yeah, son, if the job's, too tough for some people, it's just about right for us. And so he brought that kind of hard work mentality. And that was something he'd say to the kids when they were little, when something broke or we had to fix it or it seemed like it was a lot. So I think it's a little bit of both. Yeah, a little bit of both.
Yeah, I love that. And
Mhm.
so how did you realize, or was it a realization that revealed itself maybe as you're writing this book and you just see this common thread that is not just mantras for motherhood, but it was things that showed in your classroom and in the real estate business and in life. And
Sure. Yeah. Well,
so
how did that kind of come together? So
yeah, unpack that for me.
I will. Well, sure. Well, so part of it was that I've been asked because I've talked to a lot of people about the book. Well, what made you decide to write it? Like I shared with you earlier, I had people asking me, "What do you do?" And I share a few things here or there. So about probably as my big kids were in high school, I said, "Okay, if I'm seriously going to do this, I need to start thinking about doing it." That was whatever, how many 15 years ago. But the bottom line is we made a list. And what's funny is I said, write down all the sayings, the little mantras that I've said, which ones mean something to you. And by the way, it's not just 21 of them. There were like over 30 things the kids wrote down. They were sitting there brainstorming together. It was deciding that we didn't need to create an encyclopedia of my mantras, that we needed to decide which ones were the most powerful. And that should go out right away. And so I took that list and it was literally handwritten and I slid it under the blotter on my desk and it sat there for a long time. I think that was probably part of it because when I shifted gears and started coming into the office and working in our home office in real estate, I saw that all the time. And then when I began to put this book together finally a few years ago, and I was like, okay, I'm going to write about this. Obviously, I need to have some personalized examples of how this played out in our world, as well as because I have a master's degree in education and psychology. So I also was, had a lot of research elements about why do we do certain things and how do we make choices and, cognitive processes are involved. So I was like pulling out the data or the information to help explain why. And then the stories to tell why. I realized, oh, well, I have a story about that in with the kids. Well, I have a story about four of those stories from the classroom. That could be a whole nother set of books, the infamous things that you experience as a teacher. And then I thought to myself, well, that's like what we did because I train a lot of agents for our company. Not, we work for a larger real estate firm. So I train a lot of agents for them. And I realized that between clients and agents, those things were true also as I was working through, working with adults. And I started to see that pattern. And that's when I realized, oh, this book has potential really for a lot of people. to understand that the way that we approach life on a daily basis, there's lots of things we can do to make it to make ourselves the best version of ourselves we can be. And so
Yeah.
that's where it comes from.
Yeah, and I love how it's not compartmentalized to one area of life, but it truly is in every single facet of what
Yeah.
you're going through and experiencing.
Absolutely. Well, and part of the reason I truly realized that was I guess you call it a beta book. I put together a beta book when it was still a, stapled PDF deal that I spiral bound and scribbled a copy or cover on and said, okay, friends, here's a package of Post-it notes. Here's the book. You are welcome to tag all the errors I haven't found yet. But would you read through it? And then I asked like 5 basic questions to see like where it would land for people, right? I have friends that are retired. I have that are grandparents now. And I thought, well, let me have them read it. Retired business people, retired educators. I have clients who are young parents. And so I said, would you mind reading this book for me? I'll take you to lunch for a trade-off. You read my book, I'll take you to lunch, and then you can give me some feedback on it. And I did that across the board. I handed it to my children and their friends. And I said, feedback. And what I got was interesting, but had similar thread feedback from everybody. Like it had a place for grandparents who are helping with their grandchildren now, or who are looking at life differently in this last, third of life. I saw parents going, oh my gosh. I had two business owners going, oh my gosh, I need to deal with my staff this way. So that's when I realized, okay, it does have, I'm not crazy. This does, weave its way through different,
Yeah.
but definitely parents, all the parents were like, oh my gosh. Yeah, for sure.
So I'm curious too. Let's say hypothetically speaking that Colleen goes on this speaking tour
Okay. Colleen would
for the
love.
book. I get that sense, like, and I know you would be great at it. You're a wonderful storyteller, and so I know that it has to be something that you do next. But let's say you go on this speaking tour. Would your talks be different if you were addressing business people versus educators versus parents versus like a women's retreat or something, or would
I
they pretty much be similar?
I think there's a yes and a no to that. And that comes from my years of being an educator too, because when I was teaching in the classroom, I was also what was called a BITSA support provider for our school district. And I did a lot of teacher training. And then after I got my master's, I had the opportunity to go out and do some speaking around the country on technology integration standards, all this different stuff. My message never changed. It was always about, whether I was working with kids and wanting them to succeed in the classroom, or talking with teachers and educators around the country about creating success for students in the classroom. There was a common core theme to all of it. So in that way, no, it doesn't change, because if you are working on, for example, one of my favorite, well, I haven't even talked about this. One of my favorites is called Always Stop at the Lemonade Stand. We always taught our kids, if there was a little small child business, we always stopped and encouraged their hard work, their entrepreneurship, and the fact that they were out there trying to do something constructive. And so it's about generosity is the core that's about, is about showing you. And if I'm going to teach about generosity, there's going to be a generosity of spirit that needs to be taught, whether I'm talking to parents and how we cultivate that with our children, or how we cultivate that with our coworkers, or how we cultivate that with students. That's not going to change, but obviously the delivery method's going to change, so that part would be a little different. How are you going to implement that? You're probably not going to put a gratitude jar out in the middle of the you could, but it probably isn't going to fly really really big to put a gratitude jar out in the middle of the workroom. But to put a gratitude jar out on the counter or on a shelf, where every time somebody's grateful for something in your house, they drop it in the gratitude jar, which we did things like that. But to have Post-it notes available everywhere, so you could write a jot down and walk by one of your coworkers' computers and tap a thank you note, or I would encourage, like, send out a group-wide email and talk about something you were grateful for from someone that you worked with this week. That delivery method would change. So as far as that kind of thing goes, but as far as how do we cultivate gratitude and how do we make others feel good, that doesn't change at all. So
Yeah.
I hope that makes.
And how important though something so, I don't want to say simple, but simple.
They're all simple, really, when you get down to it, Val. They're all very, very simple because, integrity, focus, being yourself. I have a don't be normal. And I mean, it's just such an issue for children right now because of social media,
Mm,
because of the world that we're
mm.
in. They all feel like they have to transform into whatever they're being told. But it doesn't change. We're adults. Okay. We all want to make sure that everybody is pleased with us. So they're basics, and, having vision, having hard work, overcoming obstacles, showing self control, making good choices. Those are all so simple, but they're not.
Mm,
Peeling an onion back, there's so many layers to what makes us end up kind of blowing it in any particular direction. So they're powerful. But I think there's something that maybe you and I were raised with a whole lot more. My mother is now legally blind, and so she counts on us reading things to her and everything. And she bought the book. She came to my house. Well, we had this little thing, and she wanted a book, so I signed it. I laughing. Mom, I love you, and I just signed this, but you can't even read what I signed. She goes, I don't care. It said, I know I have it. She held it like this all night long. But she is dying because the audiobook will be out soon. And she depends on hearing it. She can't wait to hear all these little nuggets. But when I was telling her about it, she kept throwing things out. They're the sayings we grew up with. A penny saved is a penny earned. Like, that was the kind of little saying my mother, would have always said to me. And yet it's such a core, simple thing about, saving our money.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's so many of them that are so simple, but we
But
move
yet
in.
they have such a significant impact.
They do. They do. They very much do. They do.
Yeah. So, Colleen, I'm just curious. Do you have teenagers or younger kids that have kind of adopted you as like a fun adopted aunt?
Oh, they call me mama. They all call
Yeah,
me mama.
I love that.
It's all of my, I mean, it's the hardest part about having my youngest, well, all three of my kids went away to college, but, and of course, number three had to because number one and two did. I don't stay here. They didn't stay here. We have a big university right here in our city, but no, we couldn't stay here with mom and dad. But the bottom line is, I don't get to have all of them around as much, but like just 2, 3 weeks ago, maybe it's been a month ago, my daughter's best friend growing up, who's having the baby that I spoke of, her husband's written about in the book because I'm so impressed with him. They had their baby shower here in town, but all of them stayed at our house. We had 15 young 30-year-olds to 20-year-olds at our house, on couches, on beds, on everything, because they were all coming together. They've all stayed close, and they're all over the country now, but they all flew in, they all came in, and they all stayed here because that's just, we were always mom and dad. And when my younger one comes home, there's just a pile of people at our house all the time. And some of them come by or text me and talk to me just anyways. And so, yeah, yeah. And that's something I do encourage parents, moms out there. And I know it just depends. I know I'm very social, so it doesn't faze me. But if you want to have a heartbeat on what's happening, the pulse of what's going on with your kids, then your kids need to be around you and you need to see the kids they're around. And so
Yeah.
one of the things that was huge for us was just making sure our home was the place where all the kids wanted to be. And that meant keeping our mouth shut every once in a while and developing being the cool parents so that we could hear the conversations and so that the kids leaned into us. And it drives our our daughter that's off at Arizona State, the one that's still in college. She'll be home and the group of kids will come in, and she's got this group of boys she was just really close to. There's some really great young men in that group, and they just love my husband. And so they'll be in the house for a half an hour and she won't even know they're there because they're in talking with my husband, Brian, because they just want to hang out with him and catch up. And she'd be like, hi, we're all watching a movie. Yeah, we'll be there in a bit. We're talking to Brian right now. Yeah. So they just love him so much. So it's important to develop that rapport so that they're around you for sure.
I and I think it's a goal, whether unspoken or spoken, of so many parents, not just moms, but parents, to be that trusted
Mm-hmm.
central place for not only their own children, but for those friends of their
Oh,
children.
yeah.
And
Well,
it
and
is,
it's vital. And especially if as you get to know these kids, they don't get that from their own. And they need to know they have a safe place. My kids have had friends who, I say this carefully, I had a friend in high school. My mom doesn't get to listen to this podcast because I love her and I want her to teach her well. But I had a friend in high school whose parents were going through a divorce and her life was a mess, and she lived less than a mile from us. But I knew all she needed was a place to lay her head at night every once in a while that didn't feel crazy. And
hmm,
I had two twin beds in this big old room that I had. And so I'm like, can she come stay with us for a while? Or can she have that option? And it wasn't an option in my home. And so one of the things I promised myself is that I would never be a house where someone didn't feel comfortable and be a refuge if they needed a place to be. And we have
hmm,
been that for some of our kids' friends. It caused me a little chaos as a teacher, but if I have this peer counseling program, and there were a couple of times where I had one of my kids one time called me middle of the night. She had gotten in a fight with her mom and she was out on the street. We picked her up. We let her mother know where she was. And the next day we, did what we needed to do to help take care of her. But I never want to be a place where people didn't feel like they could come. And so I think that's
Yeah.
valuable. As a parent, it doesn't have to get to that extreme, but just pay attention to the ones who need a little more love, and you will have more of an influence on their lives than you ever imagined, because they'll be paying attention to what love looks like, even if they haven't seen it in their own home. They'll see it in yours, and it makes a mark. It makes a mark
Mm,
in their life, definitely.
yeah, that's a high call. I love that so much. And this is a random aside, but not really. Where in California are you?
I'm in the Central Valley. I live in Clovis, California. So we
Oh,
are,
Clovis.
yeah. So we are. You're in Los Angeles, right?
No,
Right?
I'm in South Dakota.
You're in South Dakota. So
I'm in South Dakota, but I grew up in Pismo Beach.
Okay. Okay. My husband's parents retired over there. So you grew up around the corner from
Yeah.
us, technically. Yeah. Yeah, we are in the Central Valley. We're in Clovis. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
An
So
interesting little pocket of the state. We're not like the rest of the state. In case you're going, oh gosh, she's Californian. We're different. We're different here, I promise. We're kind
there
of
are
like
good people in California.
there are some people in California that have not lost their minds. Anyways, go ahead.
So when you're talking about like your kids being in school and hundreds of kids from the class and everything, like what is the, I guess, per grade, what's the average class size?
Pretty big. They were
Yeah.
pretty big. My average, when I talked about that homeroom, my English and history classes, that I would have, I had at least 35 to 40 kids in those classes.
Wow.
They were packed.
Yeah.
And those were gangly middle school bodies. Really gangly middle school bodies. But you just opened the windows and loved them. Yeah.
But and that first part is key. Yeah. We moved away, we moved to Wyoming actually the summer I turned 13.
Okay.
And I went from
Laid back beach town.
Judkins Middle School, which was only 7th and 8th grade. And I think it had like 850 students at the time, just in 7th and 8th grade, to Powell Middle School. I think there were like, I don't know, it was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I think there were fewer than 300 kids in this.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know, but it was a big difference.
I'm sure. I was going to say, because I knew even over on the Central Coast, I'm a bit familiar. The classroom sizes aren't quite as impacted as they are here in the Central Valley. When my kids graduated from high school, all of their graduation classes had almost 800 kids in them, just their
Yeah.
graduating class. So you put four of those classes together, and you got small cities. We had, our high school campuses have over 3,000 kids on them. They're packed.
Yeah, that's insane. The high school that I would have gone to, I mean, this is a few years ago, okay? But the high school that I would have gone to had over 3,000 students, and I graduated in Powell. There were 135 in my class when I graduated.
There you go. Yeah. It's a very different experience. And that's important too. As we parent our kids, if you have kids that are teenagers and they're going to head out into the world or going off to college or doing different things, that was really a powerful thing for my kids, because they didn't do the normal. Here in the Central Valley of California, our school district's high ranking and everything, which is wonderful, but they really pushed the kids to going to school at the UC, University of California, or the Cal State schools, or a couple of the big private schools. And they prepped them for this anticipated mindset out here. And my son went to the University of Waterloo in Toronto, Ontario, after spending a year at Bible College up at Abbotsford in British Columbia.
Oh, wow.
It was associated with the Mennonite seminary that's here in town. He found out about it, and he wanted to do this leadership year. But nonetheless, and my daughter went off to FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology in Manhattan. And so they jumped into worlds that were so completely separate from here, and realized that there's just different points of view and perspectives, and the way that, what was normal for them was not normal for other kids. And I think that's a super important perspective that we give our kids too, as we're raising them, because we all get this normal and we get into our little thing that we do. But as they go off, they're going to experience things that are completely different.
Yeah.
And they would call us and go, "Oh my gosh, did you know?" Or it was just small things. Like my daughter went off to design school because that's what she was born to do. But she laughs that she got in by the grace of God, because she had these stick figure-ish kind of things she was drawing potential fashion outfits on. And within a year of being at design school, she'd go, "Mom, please burn anything that I had from prior, because it's humiliating." But she would go to school with these kids that their high schools had design programs. And here in California, that just wasn't on the list of things.
Yeah.
So you go off into situations that are so very different, and people think differently. And preparing your kids for that is huge. I have a chapter, it's called Be Radically Open-Minded. And it's not about having your core beliefs change, but just being open to lifelong learning, open to the concept that things around you aren't always exactly as people see things differently, and that we have to be open to listening, because that's what gives us strength to get along with others. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Well, this conversation has been so much fun.
I hope
And,
so.
but I suppose at some point we need to get to the practical how-tos on like how to find you, how to find your book. And also, I'm just going to say this, podcast listeners, how to book Colleen to
Please,
speak at your next event.
please. I spend a lot of time teaching, and I, like I shared in my last years of the education world, I was out around the world doing public addresses on how to do all these things. And I sort of put that little piece of myself that I loved away and shifted gears and came alongside my husband and did all this fabulous real estate and entrepreneurial shit for the last 15 years. But I feel like I'm returning to my passion and my call. And that is to get back out and teach in a way that allows me to get in front of folks and share with them, ideas that will just make us all a little bit better.
Yeah.
A little bit better. That's the whole idea behind it. So I can tell you the book is, I'll hold it up here. It's called Living by the Mantras, Common Sense Wisdom for an Extraordinary Life. And it really is about those principles of those bedrock principles about leading a better life and loving one another and taking care of one another. It can be found on my website is simple, livingbythemantras.com. From my website, there's some free little study guides to download right now. Those will get better, bigger. I hope to write a study guide. There's only for 5 of them right now, but I do want to write a study guide for the whole book. Just the thoughtful thinking things.
Yeah.
Podcast will be coming out in November, and I'm really looking forward to I would love to have you back on mine and have that conversation when it comes to some of these different things, how that looks, but just really getting the word out there that we can take care of one another in a new way. So there you go.
I encourage all of the listeners to, of course, check the show notes. You know where to find the details so that you can follow up with Colleen. And I just want to ask this question as well. As far as you had dreamt about writing this book, you finally were able to achieve it. Do you feel like also this book is a wonderful, tremendous accomplishment for you personally, but it's also leaving a legacy for your family for generations to come?
Yeah, I really do feel that way. I do feel that way. I feel like it's an opportunity to, anytime we write something, it gives us something to be remembered by. That is for sure. I'm going to give you that. I think it's kind of funny along those lines of really quickly, a short story. My son was dying to hear the final version or read the final version. And I didn't have, had the one copy they had sent me, I'm like, not have that. He was here visiting. He lives over in San Luis Obispo, so he lives over in the Pismo area.
Oh yeah, that's where we went to church.
Yep, there you go. And so he was like, "Mom, I need the copy of the book." I'm like, "No, but I can send you this digital advanced reader copy that I have. It's like my final edit online." And so I sent it to him, and he was back over here a couple weeks later, and he's like, "Yeah." I go, "What'd you think?" He goes, I have to listen to a chapter at a time and put it aside because I feel like you're sitting right there talking in my ear and I can't get a word in edgewise. And so I thought that was a hilarious take on it. And he said, yeah, I love you, but I'm going to have to buy the written book because if I listen to the audiobook, which I did myself, he's like, it's going to be like you're talking at me for hours. And I just can't do that. And my youngest daughter agreed with the same sentiment. But I think legacy wise, when I'm gone one day, they'll always have that. They'll always have not only the book that Mom wrote that tells a story, but also hearing me tell it. And I think that's
your own voice,
valuable piece for that, for sure.
I love that so much. Well, Colleen, this has been just a delight to have you. I'm so glad that you came and shared your motherhood journey, and also just how not only it shaped the mantras, but the mantra shaped the motherhood and that whole cycle. It's been a delight having you. Thank you for being a guest on the Motherhood Experience.
Thank you for everyone that's listened, and have a great day.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. Be sure to follow the Motherhood Experience on Facebook or Instagram, and please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.